Everyone knows the story. The heroic charge, the desperate bayonet moment in time, and the moment that saved the Union battle line here at Gettysburg. But what if I told you some of that story might not be true? That there's a little controversy surrounding it. And some of what we have learned here at Little Round Top, where the 20th Maine stood. Some of those secrets are right here. Today, we're going to take you to this location, walk you around the field, let you see the place where the legend unfolded. And then we're going to break down the story between myth, legend, and the truth. Welcome back to History with Waffles. We don't just tell about history, we stand where the history actually happened. And today, we're climbing that history. It's here at Little Round Top where I'm at today. I'm walking down towards the 20th Maine location right now. And I've also got a special guest that's coming out here, Mike, 6 Questions Lentz. So, he's going to tell us a little bit about the controversy on the charge, the fated charge that happened out here. And, on top of that, we're going to kind of walk through some of the locations out here where the 20th Maine might have been, Strong Vincent and a few other actors here in this battle that was so important for Little Round Top. If you like what we do, make sure to hit that subscribe button and stick around for more, because we have a lot to uncover here on this channel for this particular video about Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain and the 20th Maine. Now we're coming out here to Gettysburg to tell quite a few stories while we're here, and mostly for the Gettysburg Film Festival. But I thought I'd stop in on Big Round Top and take a look at a monument that a lot of people really don't visit. That monument right there is dedicated to the 20th Maine. Now, the majority of the time, when you hear the story about the 20th Maine and Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain, you're thinking about that direction over there. Little Round Top, the bayonet charge, the Medal of Honor recipient, the men coming down the hill, being trapped in some points, not having enough ammunition to fight. This is the extreme left, in accordance with the movie. Well, in accordance with this monument, this was the extreme left on Big Round Top for the 3rd of July. Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain, in pursuit of the enemy, captured this hill. And this was the position that the 20th Maine was in on the evening of the 2nd of July, going into the 3rd that morning. We're going to walk a little bit down here to another position that has a marker down there by a stone wall. We're going to see what we can see. Now, admittedly, I don't know a whole lot about Big Round Top or the battle that happened up here, or a lot of the things that took place, because just like everybody else, I focused in on a lot of the old tales that were written about this place. The Little Round Top story particularly, and the movie Gettysburg highlights that dramatic point. But if you look at the movie Gettysburg and you see the soldiers charging down the hill, running far down a hill towards the Alabamians, the enemy, you picture a place like this right here, Big Round Top. This steep slope that is directly behind me here. You kind of picture that in your mind, and that's another marker for the 20th Maine right here. But it wasn't like that. The field on that side, Little Round Top, if you've never been there before, I'm about to show you what you see. And there's not a whole lot there. It's kind of steep on one side, but not nearly as large as Big Round Top. Here, there are actual stone walls in place, some of which I'm pretty sure was here during the time of the Battle of Gettysburg. One particular cropping of stone walls is right here. This is almost in the shape of a U, like a soldier might have been placed behind it, awaiting the enemy. Which brings me to the controversy surrounding the charge. Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain. There's so many haters out there for this guy, this very heroic man who suffered so much after the American Civil War from a wound that he received in Petersburg. Why so much hatred? Why so much controversy? Well, sometimes I like to surround myself with people who are way smarter than I am at these subjects. And I got a friend here in Gettysburg who is just that person. He has been studying this battle forever, and he is well prepared to talk about this topic. We're going to have Mike Lentz here in just a second, as soon as I get over there and find him, and we're going to talk about the controversy here at Gettysburg.
I mean, how do you separate myth from legend, legend from fact? I mean, that's a very good question. And that's kind of the what we do here at Gettysburg, is try to figure out what actually happened out here. And I think one of the places that has layers and layers of legendary stories connected with it is where we're standing right now, which is the 20th Maine position on the Round Top. I mean, Chamberlain will live a long time after the war is over, and he will, and of course being a professor of rhetoric and being, again, after the war being a governor of Maine, he's in a prominent position to really help craft the narrative of what happens on this hill, or what happened here on July 2nd, 1863. But not everybody agrees with his account. Not even some of his more prominent officers, like Major Ellis Spear, is going to have major disagreements with him as to what exactly happened. And then you add on to that layer, the fiction writers come into this.
Right.
Michael Shara writes about what happens here, which gets adapted into not only an account in a documentary series, but also in a movie, full-length movie. So in a lot of cases, the myth, the legend, really gets cemented by those who write about what happens here and by those who interpret what they wrote.
Mm.
And so my question is, what do you want to know? Do you want to know the truth? I don't know what the truth is. To be perfectly honest, I don't know.
Yeah.
Because there are so many layers to this story.
Yeah.
That not even all of Chamberlain's accounts truly sync up with each other.
Right.
And so you have to kind of weed through all of that to know what happens.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Chamberlain years later comes back to Petersburg and tries to determine where he actually got wounded when he took that bullet from hip to hip.
Right.
And he ends up at Fort Damnation.
Okay.
And he says, this is the place.
Right.
He was far from the place, which makes me kind of question a little bit of his judgment on all of the events that happened throughout the Civil War, because if you don't know where you took a bullet from hip to hip and you have no idea where that moment happened, how exactly accurate are you on what happened here? And how important is that to the story anyhow?
And it's important to know that. It goes back to the vagaries of human memory.
Right.
You know, some of the things you look at Petersburg, for example, and a lot of that area, that terrain, by the time that assault's happening, Second Petersburg, is basically looking very similar to each other. Their fortifications.
Yes.
So it's easy enough to confuse one for the other. I mean, even if you go down today, it's easy enough to if you didn't have signs,
right?
Would you be completely aware what fort was what?
No, you probably wouldn't.
You probably wouldn't.
Yeah.
And so, in my defense of Chamberlain here is that humanity, we don't have a picture-perfect recollection of everything we ever do. For Chamberlain, is there some doubt here? Yeah, there is doubt here.
Right.
But it goes to the bigger problem of, is there really anything you know for sure
Exactly.
on this battlefield?
Yeah. July 2nd of 1863, the Union Army under General George Gordon Meade, the newly appointed officer in charge of the entire army here, forms a defensive line in the shape of a fishhook. And that line stops right here, somewhere on these ridge lines, a little round top. Now there's markings off in the distance over there for the 20th Maine and the positions that they held, but that's the extreme flank. If this line fails to hold, not only do they get swept from these ridges, it is possible that the entire Union Army is defeated here at Gettysburg. Not only are the Army, but the cause for which they stand. A defeat here could be disastrous on a national stage. And just like it says on the monument right here to Strong Vincent behind me, the 83rd Pennsylvania Monument, the men are rushed forward here about 5 p.m. and they're told to hold this position. 20th Maine is off in the distance over there, and Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain with his men are also told to hold this position at all costs. They know what happens if they get wrapped up and folded around. So these men are not going to move. They are not going to budge, and their officers are also there to make sure that that is exactly what happens. Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain with the 20th Maine is brought out to this position directly ahead of me, where you can see that old Union soldier climbing down the hill, only in Gettysburg, am I right? But he's brought out to this position here at Gettysburg, and he is told to hold this position at all costs, at all hazards. It didn't matter what the cost was. This was the flank. It cannot be taken. His orders were simple. You're the extreme left of the Union line. You must not retreat. If you're outnumbered or exhausted or low in ammo, it does not matter. You cannot be flanked. Now you see this road here that runs directly off in front of me there, and then the hill just directly ahead. That's Big Round Top. And this is kind of a no man's land down through here, just before you get up towards the 20th Maine Monument that's right up there on that hill. And of course you see the rebuilt defense works that may or may not have been here exactly like that during the time of the battle. We're going to head on over to a place where the Alabamians most definitely came up, and they were facing Spear as they were coming up that hill. And this is the portion of the line that was directly contributing to that retreat whenever they talk about the bayonet charge. Now line after line of Confederate soldiers from William C. Oates would come charging up this hill, directly in the distance behind me. And I'm actually walking down towards the forward most extended position of the 20th Maine here. And these soldiers are coming up through these woods here, and they're attacking. They're coming wave after wave. Now, if you're on the other side of Little Round Top where the parking lot is, and you look up, it doesn't look like much of a hill. And you start to wonder, why on earth does the movie portray it as this huge hill where soldiers are streaming up and down? Well, it's because the huge hill is on the other side. This position here is where the hand-to-hand combat starts to take place. They're shooting at each other. They're using swords. They're throwing rocks if they run out of ammo. Anything that they can do to protect themselves and to fight off the enemy here in this position. So, what happens? Well, there was a moment that comes that it defines the fight that happens here with the 20th Maine. It changes the outcome of this part of the battle. And it also leads to a little controversy.
Chamberlain will send out Company B of the 20th Maine to serve as skirmishers out in this area to kind of tell him of early warning in case a Confederate flank attack heads his direction. Once he sends them, he claims that once he sends them out, he never hears from them again. So he's going, okay, so those guys are off the board. What do I do now? Where we're standing is at the position of where those guys ended up. They came out here to a wall that was between the round tops. And the first indicator that the Confederates were coming in their direction were, as they were here, a handful of green-clad sharpshooters jump into their lines. And they asked the sharpshooters to stay with them. And the sharpshooters say, yeah, okay. Not direct quote. But the idea was, those are the sharpshooters that Oates' men have been chasing up and over Big Round Top. And so here, when Oates' attack happens, and he's going to try to flank through these woods and flank the Union position, you can't really see the 20th Maine from where we're at because it's so grown up. But he's going to try to hit the flank of the 20th Maine over and over and over again. As his men withdraw, and there's a question mark about the withdrawal, and we'll get to that, what happens is, as his men are starting to withdraw, all of a sudden the disappearing Company B pops up from behind the stone wall and pours in fire into them. And that precipitates the Alabamians getting out of here as quickly as possible. So this is one of the least visited portions of this story. This is supposedly the position of Company B of the 20th Maine. I say supposedly because we have to remind ourselves these monuments are placed sometimes 20, 30, 40 years later. And oftentimes the story dictates in these veterans' minds where this goes. Not necessarily where it was exactly, but where their conversations with each other say it happened.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. So just like the monument says here, Captain Walter G. Morrill and his Company B of skirmishers are detached way down here. You see that trail behind me? This is the one I had to take to get here. This is a place that most everybody skips when they come here to talk about the 20th Maine or to even be a part of this. But licensed battlefield guides and people like my friend Mike Sixth Question Lentz, they study for this stuff and they go to these positions and they know the locations to take you to give you a better understanding of the fight that happened here. Well, in this position, these guys are forward deployed right here. And they're looking off all along this direction here. And William C. Oates and his men are coming up through there. They're going to swing around as far as they can to get through this position to try to gain the flank of the 20th Maine, which is up here on that hill. The fighting ensues downhill, and it comes fast and ready when the actual charge happens. But let's think about that charge. There's a little bit of controversy surrounding it and how it actually happened. But when you're standing over there in front of that 20th Maine monument, there's no way to picture an actual uphill battle until you come down here to this position.
So the story of what happens here really gets enhanced by Michael Shera and by Ken Burns and Ron Maxwell, so much so that this place, which had otherwise gone to kind of neglect becomes a place people come to. And so a flank marker was placed here to denote where the 20th Maine bent back their line to meet the Confederate attack. We're standing at the very edge of the Confederate attack. And if you can see, there's a little road that's been put up here, but you can see it is a hill. This is not an easy thing to get up. And you have to keep in mind that the 15th Alabama, which is attacking this position, has already marched 20 plus miles that day on July 2nd in almost 80 to 90 degree heat and humidity. They haven't had water for hours. And these guys are having to attack through all of this to get up there.
Yeah.
Now, how many times they get up there and how many times they break through or get pushed back is very much up to interpretation and varies depending on which participant you talk to. But why we're down here is probably the most famous part of this entire story, which is the bayonet charge of the 20th Maine. If you're these poor guys from Alabama, they're completely exhausted, they're thirsty, you've attacked this hill multiple times, and now all of a sudden you see a whole bunch of blue-clad men with bayonets coming down on you, what is your reaction going to be?
Oh, you're getting out of here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the complication here is that the regimental commander, William Oates, says he actually ordered the withdrawal of his men before Chamberlain's men counterattacked down the hill.
Yeah.
So who do you believe?
Right.
Do you believe Oates?
Right.
Do you believe Chamberlain's men?
Yeah.
Oates himself would become a governor in post-war Alabama. He would lose a brother in this fight on Little Round Top. This place is as personal to him as it is to Joshua Chamberlain.
Yeah.
So the question is, who do you believe?
Right.
And for Oates, I mean, I can see him saying, we've done enough here, let's go. And then at that moment, here comes the blue-clad men.
Right.
I could easily see him not giving that order, or maybe in the process of giving that order, and then the charge happens.
Right.
But we will never know exactly, because no one's setting up a video camera here at the time going, well, and checking their watch.
Yeah.
Saying, okay, this is what actually happened here.
So I guess we have to question then, when we want to know who to believe here, is who has more to lose?
Yeah.
Does the Alabama soldier who's already lost the war have more to lose if he tells a lie? Or?
Well, that factors into it.
Right.
Or how do you build your reputation after the war? Because a lot of these men, like Chamberlain, are going to become politicians after the war.
Yeah.
Chamberlain's going to become a governor of Maine.
Yeah.
And so keeping those accounts, especially officer accounts, keeping that in mind when you're reading about this and those primary sources, that's something you have to factor in.
Yeah.
The same goes for Oates. Now for Oates, in his case, he is trying to set the record his own story.
Yeah.
But he's not releasing his story until well after the war is over.
Right.
Decades after. And again, as you know, when we get further away from an event like this, which is traumatizing enough,
right,
so our brains don't necessarily capture everything that happened here, we then tend to fudge with it a little bit. And so, is Oates correct? Probably. Is Chamberlain correct? Probably. We don't know that for sure.
Yeah.
The best we can do is we can interpret what happens and make the best judgment call we can based on the sources that we have as historians.
So it's somewhere in between.
So it's somewhere there.
Yeah.
And where do you stand on that interpretation is something you have to ask yourself based on the sources that you read.
Yeah.
And every source will sometimes kind of take you in a different direction a little bit, at least, than where you were before. My personal belief is I think Oates probably did order the withdrawal, but I think the charge happened so quick on the heels of that they were leaving anyway.
Yeah.
And so I think it was happening so fast to each other.
Yeah.
That's what I interpret it as being.
And maybe neither one really knew.
And yeah.
Because you look through this forest, if you are charging down this hill, you don't know that those guys are turning around and going back because they've been ordered to go.
And if you want to turn the camera here, look at the boulders throughout this entire area. The trees have grown up, but the boulders have gone nowhere. So these boulders, who knows? If you're the Maine guys coming down the hill, could these Alabama guys rally behind one of these boulders?
Right.
So you don't know.
Yeah.
And you're also chasing them this direction. It's not as neat as the movie likes to portray. It's not as neat as a swinging door. It's a charge.
Yeah.
And that charge happens not in formation. That's why charges are so risky.
Yeah.
Is because they break formation and are vulnerable. It's not neat. It's not nice. And so, yeah, there's a lot going on here that kind of makes the situation a little bit more confusing and harder to nail down.
Yeah. Now, with no ammunition left, desperate, not knowing what to do, Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain has a decision to make. And that decision comes in the form of a charge. He tells them to fix bayonets. According to the movie, he has a quick huddle with his officers, and he gives them all directions as to what they need to do. And he tells them, you have to swing like a door. Swing downhill like a door. That was refuted by a few people, the way that it actually took place. So he orders that bayonet charge. The 20th Maine surged down the hill that's directly in front of me, and they push the Confederates off of this position and break their combat soul, if you will. A lot of men were captured and killed out here as a result. Or was that exactly how it happened? We're going to find out. So here's the thing. What if the charge didn't happen that way? I know I'm alluding to it, and I'm talking about it. And I'm sure some of you out there, super history nerds that have been studying this for a while, you know what I'm talking about. But for those of you that are big Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain fans or fans of the movie Gettysburg, maybe you're scratching your head. Waffles, what the heck are you talking about? Well, I have that guide, like I said, that's coming out here, my friend, and he's going to tell us a little bit more about this position and the fight directly ahead that's attached to the controversial words between three people: Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain, Ellis Spear, and William C. Oates, the opposing man who has nothing to lose by telling a lie. All he has to do is tell the truth. He lost this battle, and his brother, right here on this field.
Chamberlain's and Oates' accounts aren't the only ones that we have of this fight. We have a third account. We have more than that, but we have a third prominent member named Major Ellis Spear. Ellis Spear is the second in command of the 20th Maine here at Gettysburg. And when Chamberlain, in defense of his position, refuses his flank or bends it back, he's going to put Spear in charge of the left flank of his line. Now, Spear will account, he and Chamberlain have completely different views about warfare and the glory in warfare. Chamberlain, yes, he does recognize that there's savagery. He does understand that it's a bloody affair, but he has a little bit more glorious picture of war than Spear does. Spear sees this as a nasty, awful, bloody business. So when you read Spear's accounts, it's usually not full of all the fluff of bravery and courage and knighthood. It's very much, he's very jaundiced towards the notion of it's a glorious thing to die for your country. And a lot of that comes from after war, because after this battle, what are you experiencing? The Overland Campaign.
Yeah.
And I beg any of you, if you've lived through the Overland Campaign, not to have a similar view of war as he does.
Right.
I mean, that's the thing. So what he says about what happens here, the most famous account that Chamberlain says, is that he orders, once his ammunition is spent, and he detects that there's enemy fire coming from his rear, he decides he has orders by Vincent, who had put him here, were to hold this to the last. So his only option left, because he has no ammunition left, is to fix bayonets and charge. Now in the movie, it makes it seem very neat, like a swinging door down a hill, down this hill. But Spear has a different memory of that. He will say that at one point he looks over and they determine they're going to charge. They've made that decision. And he sees the right flank go first. And he goes, okay. And he goes.
Oh.
So it's not that neat.
Yeah.
Right? And
yeah.
That's his account.
Right.
Or at least one of his accounts.
Oh, okay.
So yes, this is the thing. Again, the further we go out. But what also punctures this, and what also kind of tinges this, is towards the end of Chamberlain's life, he's going to write one of his final accounts of what happens here. And it's for the Hearst newspapers.
Mm.
And it's a thing full of glory. Ellis Spear is incensed.
Mm.
And they have a falling out between the two of them.
Yeah.
Because of it.
Yeah.
And because of their different views of how this went.
Right.
So a lot of that, again, of what we remember of an event is as much how the men feel about each other as well as what happens here on the ground.
Okay.
Could Spear be right? Could he have seen Chamberlain moving forward with that flank and then he goes?
Yeah.
Yeah. Could Spear have gone first and then Chamberlain goes next? Sure.
Yeah.
It's all subject, again, to the sources we have. And since this is going to be sounding very maddening for your video, like, can you actually say anything definitive? And my answer is no.
No.
I really can't say anything definitive.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. That's what makes history what it is.
Yeah.
It's not a recitation of facts.
Right.
It's not a recitation of stories.
Yeah.
It's interpretation.
Right.
We take the sources, we analyze them, we break them down, and then we tell a story.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And each one of us will tell a different part of that story, or we'll tell it in a different way.
Right.
And so, much like the men here who actually participated in this fight.
Yeah. One of my favorite quotes comes out of a Khalil Gibran book. And I'll give a rough estimate of what the quote is, but an author can write 1,000 books about a subject, but he can't take his reader there without having been there himself.
Yes. And so what we do is, we who have not been there ourselves,
Yeah.
the best we can do is doing what we do, what you do,
Yeah.
is to walk the ground.
Yep.
What ground is left?
Yeah.
To read the sources that are left behind for us to read, to analyze those sources, and to piece it together the best we can. These men couldn't agree on what happened here. Probably one of the most consequential times or moments in their entire lives.
Yeah.
We're not going to agree.
No.
And that's just the reality.
Yeah.
So, it's a compelling story.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, it's a very compelling story, regardless of who you're talking about. And it's just one of those things that if you're looking for definitive, try science. And even then, theories are disproven there too.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. Certainty, death, and taxes. That's basically all you got. Everything else is up to interpretation, and that's what history is. So, yeah.
So I did this earlier today with Mike Lentz going up this hill. But I wanted to turn this around and show you exactly what William C. Oates' men were facing when they were coming up this hill to charge against Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain and his men. Now you see all these huge boulders. It's all throughout here. Plenty of places for someone to tuck behind and hide. But have no doubts, this is strictly uphill. We're gonna go over here and take some good video of some of the markers for 20th Maine out here. So much of what we know about this fight comes from post-war accounts of the battle itself, long after the battle's over with, and much of that comes from Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain. He's the most publicized person on this, and then you fast forward many, many decades later, and a book called Killer Angels comes out, and it resets the whole story again, making this one of the most pivotal moments in Gettysburg and maybe the Civil War history. So, what really happens? So if you look directly ahead there, there's a marker on that hill, and that marker indicates one of the positions of the flank where Ellis Spear is actually located. This is his eventual view of the battlefield. He's all the way over here. Chamberlain is way down here somewhere when he orders that bayonet charge. And just like our guest said, there's no way of knowing down here. Spear claims he saw this side of the line come downhill first. Then he comes downhill and orders the charge. And what happens as a result? It looks like a swinging door. Everything just kind of falls into place. And if you listen to what William C. Oates says, he'd already turned his men around. There was no reason to continue to fight. They were turning around and heading back to where they came from. And as this charge just happens to come downhill, they catch the enemy with their backs turned to them, which of course drives anybody away. The last thing you want is a bayonet in your back, much less a bullet or something like that hitting you from behind. You don't want to look like a coward running away from a battle. And if you can hear that yelling and that charging, the footsteps behind you, imagine being a soldier out here and you can hear the screaming and yelling getting closer. You're going to run, and you're going to drop anything that you have on you to make sure that you're not going to be captured by the 20th Maine. And we're near the top of Big Round Top. You can see all kinds of stone walls put in place here, and that could have been later on. There's no way of telling really, unless I go and bring a licensed battlefield guide out here who knows a heck of a lot more about this place than I do. And I'm going to do that. But here is 20th Maine left position, meaning the left flank of the 20th Maine. There's that large monument we were looking at earlier. And just on the other side there was the right flank marker of the 20th Maine. That's not a very large position from here to here. Obviously combat had taken its toll. There's not very many of them left. And they're in between these two markers here. protecting Big Round Top from an enemy that's down here or across those fields. This is some pretty amazing stuff that you typically don't hear about when we talk about the Little Round Top charge. We're just now coming up to the top here, and what a beautiful view from up here. It really almost makes you wonder, why wasn't this the spot? I can see a historic farm from here, way off in the trees over there, down on the flat lands just behind Little Round Top. And that was a farmhouse out there that eventually became a hospital for soldiers. Soldiers being taken off the field back in this direction, over there where Little Round Top is and all along the ridge. This hill, as you can tell by the windedness, is very steep. To get artillery up here is a tough task. Also, soldiers attacking this field, or this hill, would be hard pressed to fight here. This is very tough terrain, which is probably the reason why those Confederates decided to go after Little Round Top and Devil's Den. They didn't seem to be as interested in Big Round Top. But for some reason, the story here at Big Round Top doesn't play a huge factor in the story of Gettysburg. So I'm down here in the shadow of the 20th Maine Monument, which is directly behind me. And the truth of this story lies somewhere in between. What we know is that the 20th Maine was ordered here. What we know is Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain was the officer in charge of that 20th Maine. What we also know is William C. Oates and the Alabamians were coming up into this position, and they did retreat. They did move on. And the 20th Maine did capture a lot of men as they were going down this hill in a bayonet charge. What we really know is that the 20th Maine, all of them, every single man in this unit that was still standing at the end of the battle, held their ground. And realistically, I think that that's probably the most important thing to remember. These brave men up here at the top of this hill, charging those Alabamians at the very moment that this could have all been over for them. They held their ground, and they kept the Union Army from being swept off the field. So I say it all the time on this channel. Battles are not won by a leader, one or two of them. They're won by thousands of men who sacrifice themselves going across these grounds here for the Civil War and the cause that they fight in. That's how a battle is won and lost. It's by the direction of those officers that those men are placed in the right spot or ordered to do the right thing at the right time. The honor, courage, commitment, the bravery of these men fighting out here led to the victory of the Union Army at this location and leads to the legend of the 20th Maine and Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain. Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain would not be awarded the Medal of Honor until 1893. Much, much later, when many other people were awarded for things as simply as standing up with courage and holding a flag, a lot earlier than he was. But Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain himself is actually telling the story of the 20th Maine by the words that he writes. And however poetic it may be, and however some of it may or may not be true, one thing he did do was he lifted these men up in memory so that many of us can learn about them today and hold them to a high esteem, a level that no other unit out here, other than a couple, maybe the 1st Minnesota, some people like that, were held to. And fast forward to the Killer Angels. He was so intriguing, that story was so intriguing that Michael Shera would write a whole plot centered around a fictitious character side by side with Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain to witness it all. This place, it holds a lot of power, and I'm glad I was able to take you out here with me.
The guy, one of his color company, goes, "I'm wounded, I can't shoot my weapon anymore." So they go, "Can I hold the colors?" And so Tozier goes, "Certainly." Hands the colors over and takes the rifle back. Takes a rifle from his corporal. Well then, his corporal goes, "I'm too hurt, I gotta go." So he hands the flag back to Tozier. So Tozier's here holding the flag, loading and firing a rifle at the same time. And then that's when both Ellis Spear and Chamberlain are both going to see this and they go, okay. For this, he gets the Medal of Honor.
That's excellent.
Now, after the war, he has wounds during the war. He'll fall into a life of crime. And this is according to, again, Raleigh P. Boys from Maine, Desjardins' book. He gets in trouble. And so the governor of Maine, because of his high-profile status, this Tozier, invites him into the governor's household to rehabilitate himself.
Wow.
And that governor of Maine, Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain.
That's pretty neat.
Yeah.
Still taking care of his soldiers.
Still taking care of his soldiers, yep. I love that story.
That's a great story. Now, if you want to see some more about Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain, I have another video that I'm going to put up here at the end credits for you. You can click on that. It'll take you right to a video that shows you the location where he was shot from hip to hip in the Battle of Petersburg that nearly cost him his life. If you want to debate this stuff, you can go right ahead. Put it in the comments. What do you think? Tell me. I want to hear it. And so do all the rest of the subscribers out there. We love getting into debates about historical events. So go ahead and put your information down there. Let's see what you got. What do you think happened here in Gettysburg during the 20th Maine charge? Is all of it true? Or is some of it a lie? Well, much like this tree behind me, Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain and the 20th Maine were bent, but they were not broken. This tree is still hanging on. But much like the tree that's sitting here on this hill, I don't know what caused that tree to fall. So I couldn't tell you the 100% truth behind the whole thing. The same thing with the 20th Maine here, where this monument stands for them, and the story that's been in so many books and so many battlefield guides and so many movies. We'll never know 100% what happened here with Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain and the 20th Maine. Well, from Gettysburg, here at the site of the 20th Maine's charge, I hope you enjoyed the video we did. Again, stop by the channel and check out the other video about his wounding in Petersburg. It'll give you a better understanding of the man and much appreciation for his sacrifice. Until next time, from Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, on location, this is History with Waffles.
We know these things for absolute sure. The Confederates attack this position.
Yes.
The Union soldiers defend this position. The Union soldiers counterattack. The Confederates withdraw.
Yeah.
That's all we know for certain.
For sure. Right.
That's it.